Hey, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night here on Kicking the Seat. I got two great companions here with me tonight, which is thematically appropriate because we're going to be talking about a film called Companion, a movie that came out, it was like a month, just about 2 months ago, the end of January, and it is already on home video and streaming, which, usually I kind of lament that fact that the window's shrinking more and more, but hey, I at least have the benefit of being able to watch something that was very recently in the theaters. Just wait a little bit and be rewarded at home, and rewarded we are because, yeah, brace yourselves. Three critics on the Kicking the Seat live stream. Mark, I think you love this movie. Jeff, I know you love this movie. I adore this movie, and we're going to talk about Companion. We're going to get into spoilerific detail, but not for a little bit, because if you're out there watching this either live or on the replay, you're going to want to wait for that spoiler banner, especially if you haven't seen the film or know anything about it. In fact, it is so vital that we protect the secrets of Companion that, yes, I have the 4K which just came out, but I'm only going to show you the spine of it because even the poster. No, Mark, careful.
Sorry. Yeah, I have mine too. Sorry.
The poster, the box art, everything. There's a spoiler within just the artwork, and
the spoiler in the trailer. So.
Well, and that's the initial trailer. I remember was kind of vague and weird, almost like a Hereditary knockoff or something. But then they had a secondary trailer, which I think probably the studio was like, we got to give the audience something because no one's going to show up to this thing. Unfortunately, I think they were kind of screwed no matter which way they went because the movie sort of came and went. And unfortunately, this was something I think should have been on everybody's radar. This is a fantastic movie, one of my favorites of the year, and my second film in the last few weeks to star Jack Quaid, which and another film, Novocaine, that I think was pretty special. So again, we're going to talk about all of this tonight. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of the Spoiler Room Podcast and Special Mark Productions, and from the Establishing Shot, and Pipeline Artists, and a birthday that is today.
Hey, happy birthday.
Jeff York.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here with you. Somebody said, are you doing something special for your birthday? I said, I'm guesting on Kicking the Seat. How special can you get?
Well, I am truly honored that you are spending the evening with us, sir. And I wish you nothing but the best of birthdays.
Thank you.
This movie, I think, was a present for me.
For sure.
But, it's kind of like someone ruining a surprise party, because I don't remember if it was the trailer or I inadvertently heard a conversation about Companion, but the big twist that is revealed in the first 15, 20 minutes of the film was spoiled for me. And Jeff, from what I understand, you went into this completely cold, so you got to experience stem to stern the big surprise, but then also the little surprises that kind of came in afterwards. Mark, I know you talked about this movie before, but what was your experience with Companion? Did you know what it was really about before you watched it, or had you just kind of walked in and said, "Oh, this looks cool"?
I knew what you're talking about, the twist that ends up getting revealed in the first 15, 20 minutes, in the first act, basically. I knew about that because I had seen the second trailer, because they had put the one trailer out, and I'm like, oh really, this looks like, I think this is what it is. And then they did the second trailer and I was like, so that is what it's about. But the story still surprised me in a very pleasant way, because I thought it was going to be all one thing involving her, and it actually they do an arc and a twist, and it covers some themes that I didn't expect them to be covering. So it ended up being far deeper than I thought it was going to be with the original trailer. But I did know the one twist with it, which I agree. I really wish they would have kept that more vague. And when we get into the disc a bit, just a little bit of hint with the disc, if you do get it, folks, watch the movie before you watch the special features, because I watched the special features of all the 3 small short like featurettes they had, and I'm like, oh, you should have a warning on here. Watch the movie before you watch these, because if you don't, you're like, the whole movie is literally ruined with those 3 featurettes. I'm like, wow, those are the most spoilery featurettes I have seen.
Well, in fairness, I feel like if you're buying the physical disc,
Right, yeah,
you're probably invested. Although I got,
and you should always watch the movie first anyway.
Yes,
Because they're going to give away something. Some
Oh,
actor tells you why his character does what his character does, and it's like, well, if you don't know that's coming, they just told you. So
yeah. But
it's for the super fans,
right? Well, but here's the thing: like, I got a review copy of this movie, and I got it cold, and I was like, well, I am interested in this film. I hope I like it. And it turns out I loved it. So for folks out there who have no idea what we're talking about, except it's a movie called Companion, I'm here to tell you this has the Ian Simmons seal of spoilerific approval. You go out and you buy this thing, and if you don't love it, I'll eat my hat. Fortunately, I'm not wearing a chapeau. But okay, so Jeff, you went in completely cold. Tell me about the experience of seeing Companion for you.
It's funny because as a critic, you'd like people to read our reviews and take our recommendations. And I try not to give away too much about it. Generally, I will give away more if I'm telling people why I don't like a movie, because it often gets to the later parts of the film where there's some mistakes made. And, even there, I try to be somewhat vague or somewhat general or without getting too specific. But it's always funny to me, so many movies that I love when I go in absolutely cold and not knowing anything about it, I have the best experiences. The best movie experience I ever had in my life was I went to a sneak of Raiders of the Lost Ark way back when and knew nothing about it. I didn't know anybody in it or anything else. They just said, movie, come down and see it. And it was a Friday night. And after college, I went down to the local Cineplex and stood in line and got in, and the movie started. And it's like, wait a minute, that's the first scene? What else are they going to do? And it was so exciting. And this one isn't quite as lofty and maybe yet to be acclaimed as that film was and maybe is in my mental state. But I will say this. I went in so cold, Ian and Mark, that I didn't even know what the poster looked like. I remember going into the theater. I don't think there was a screening for it. And I knew nothing about it except that it was called Companion. And the actress who was in it was in Heretic. Heretic, Sophie Thatcher. And I liked her a lot in that. I thought, well, I'll go see this. It sounds interesting. And as a single guy, divorced a few years ago, it seemed like, well, there you go. Maybe it's about dating. It might be interesting to live vicariously through the characters on screen, which so many of us do. And I just breezed past the poster. I saw there was her face, but I didn't really get close enough to look at it. And I walked in and was kind of gobsmacked from almost the get-go. I had a couple of inklings about some of the stuff that we'll talk about, and I'll tell you why later. But by and large, it was completely sort of a new experience for me without any kind of preconceptions about it. I hadn't heard buzz about it. I hadn't heard anything about it. The only thing I walked in with any kind of misconception or whatever was that there wasn't a critic screening. If there was, I missed it for whatever reason. Maybe I was working or there was a conflict or something, but I didn't remember hearing about it. And I thought, well, I think sometimes that's good. Then there's not expectation or like the studio's really high on this one. We'll just sort of go in neutrally. And I love the first half hour. I love the second half hour. You wait, as we've often talked about in the show, like, okay, we're hitting that hour mark. Now's where they start to pile on the cliches and ruin the film and such. And they didn't. And it kept getting more interesting. And I honestly, as much as I've seen movies for how many years and decades and had to look at them with a critical eye, I did not see where a lot of these twists and turns were going. So that was really pretty fresh right up until the end. And so I walked out of there and I said, well, it's early, but is it too soon to put a film already on my top 10 list? Because that was one, and it will be there, I'm sure.
Yeah. I watched this on Saturday night, and my wife was playing video games with my oldest and then getting him to bed. And then she came downstairs because I said, I'm going to be watching this movie Companion. And she came downstairs with 15 minutes left to go. And she was just going to like hang out on the couch and, till it was over and watch something else together. I was like, no, we are going to watch this together and you have to leave. I don't know where this is going, but yeah, you can't know anything about this. I was excited, and I still am excited to share this. And I've been telling, you know, it's a cliche. Like, I've been telling everyone I know to go see Companion. I've had 3 conversations since I saw this movie about movies, and what's new, what's good. And you have to watch Companion. I think I looked it up, and it's still playing in like a couple of random theaters, like one in Texas, probably like the dollar secondhand market or something. If you have the chance to see it on the big screen, I highly recommend that. I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't. But yeah, so I think we're at about 10 minutes into the show. So this is fair warning to anyone who has not seen Companion but is watching this live stream. Turn back now. If you have seen Companion, we're going to get into the good stuff as we talk spoilers.
Spoilers.
So this film is about a couple named Josh and Iris. It's it's funny. I talked about 2 movies this week, back to back, where the lead character's name was Iris. Very odd. But Josh is played by Jack Quaid, and Sophie Thatcher plays Iris. And they're going off to this remote. It's not exactly a cabin in the woods. It's like this giant palatial kind of woodland mansion that's owned by some kind of a Russian oligarch, I guess. But it's a weekend retreat. They're hanging out, and she's gonna get to know Josh's friends a bit more. She's very nervous because they don't seem to like her. They don't seem to quite trust her or treat her as, a real person. It turns out there's a reason for that. Because, again, spoilers, you've been warned. Iris she's a sex robot. She's officially a companion. So it's like, well, you could do anything. You could, talk to her about, sports, and she'll be really interested in it or whatever. But no, she's mostly a very realistic love bot that Josh bought because he was, kind of lonely and did not have much luck with the ladies. And we get way into that as the film goes, deeper. But at one point, very early on in this, what turns out to be a weekend of terror, Iris is out by the beach, and the Russian guy is there, and he kind of puts the moves on her, and she resists, and she accidentally kills him and wanders back to the house completely drenched in blood. And everybody is freaked out, like, what the hell is going on? Because the sex bots, as we turn, they have a non-lethal, they cannot harm people or animals or each other kind of setting in their default settings. And it's at this point where we find out that Iris is, she's a droid. Knowing the spoiler, which it's one of the big regrets of my life, is not being able to block that information out. In the 20 minutes leading up to the surprise, there are so many hints in the dialogue, in the action, that I was kind of rolling my eyes. I'm like, once the gimmick is revealed, is it just going to be more of this? But no, because they have twist upon turn upon twist upon turn, leading all the way up to the end, pretty much, and it is well worth it. But there's at one point when Josh and Iris are driving up to the cabin, they're talking, and she's getting kind of tired, and he's kind of tired of talking to her, and he says, "Iris, go to sleep." It's kind of like, go rest, honey. Well, I'll wake you up when we get there. But it's a voice command. You're trying to shut off Siri or something like that. So what happens is there's self-defense murder, if you could call it that. The group decides, well, we've got to call the company that made her and have her recalled, and then call the police and just say, yeah, the robot did it and it was an accident. But Iris, now that she becomes self-aware, because there's this whole sort of tearful goodbye conversation before she gets shut down with Josh, she realizes, well, screw that, I want to be free. And she escapes, and there's a pursuit through the woods, and then a lot more stuff happens, which we'll get into. But yeah, it's a hell of a way to open a movie. I think it's a hell of a way to open a conversation with, talk of what we knew and when we knew it. But how surprising was that moment when Iris's eyes, she's crying, she's hysterical, and Josh says, again, Iris, go to sleep. Her eyes instantly flash to white, and then smash cut to black. Jeff, tell me, what was that moment like for you?
Well, it was pretty shocking because I didn't think that she was a robot. In fact, I didn't know where that was coming from. And you're right. They do kind of weave in some stuff that upon reflection afterwards, I go, very clever use of foreshadowing there. But when he says like, Iris, go to sleep, I thought, well, I can see where this is going a little, because he's kind of controlling and she's very nervous and, uncertain of herself and maybe has some insecurities that we don't know about yet. But he seemed like he was maybe a little cocksure and, that's okay, honey, these are my friends, and, just go to sleep. The only thing that made the slightest snag in my head was when he was telling them about how they met, and they met in a grocery store, and you see her sort of just politely kind of pushing this shopping cart around. And I couldn't help but, because it's very centered, it's very symmetrical looking, almost a sort of scientific composition. It reminded me of Catherine Ross and the women in Stepford Wives, particularly at the end, which is the big climax when, for those who haven't seen Coma, it says we're talking spoilers. Plural spoilers. That goes for many movies as well as many spoilers in this one. But she's turned into an audio animatronic from the Disney engineer, who's the suburban sort of gadfly, who's making these women into their replicants, albeit controllable robots. And she's pushing her grocery cart very sort of blankly and, quietly and, subserviently down the grocery store. And it's a very famous end shot. And I thought, I wonder if that has some sort of connection to this, but I really wasn't expecting it to be that. I thought that it might be, there was some secrets about all of them and who was what. And, these days, these kind of movies tend to have, well, this person knew this person. Did they sleep with them? Is there something else going on here? Are they cheating somebody out of money? Or, is she a femme fatale? Who knows? But I did not see the robot thing coming. And then, of course, I realized afterwards that even the poster had the whites of her eyes showing, well, albeit subtly, because it's you kind of have to get in there close to see it. And like I said, when I went to the movie, it was a couple of weeks after it opened. I hadn't heard anything about it, really read anything about it, other than that there's this movie open, and it starred the star from Heretic. So I didn't see that, but yeah, that was like, wow, okay, where is this going? Because I knew that early on there was a lot more in store, and I thought, I wonder where they're going to go, and it surprised me throughout the rest of it.
Well, and here's the great thing. This movie could have been just that. You find out the one twist, and then it's the robot goes into the woods and becomes a killer and seeks revenge on the.
Right.
But it's not that. I mean,
Right.
she's a character who's trying to figure out, who she is and what she is and how to navigate the world. And there is another companion among that group, which we find out. And that was another surprise to me. But
Big
again,
surprise.
Mark, I got to ask you, because in a lot of these, because we're talking about a genre film, this is, I'm going to puke when I say it, but this is like an elevated genre film, right? But did you see, it was Patrick, who's, there's a gay couple who is in the, who's with them on this outing. Patrick, played by Lucas Gage, and his boyfriend Eli, played by Harvey Guillen. Patrick, it turns out, is also a companion. Did you see that coming?
That I didn't see coming, actually.
Okay.
That was the surprise. I mean, I knew she was going to be a robot, but like you said, I thought from the trailer, I knew she was going to be AI. I'm like, okay, so this is going to be AI run amok, is the way the trailer alludes to it, because that's all you see in the action scenes is her, getting a little violent, running through the woods. You see her attacking, briefly with flashes of flash edits and that of quick edits of her attacking people. You're like, oh, this is just going to be a robot run amok. Okay. So, I was waiting for that moment. Didn't expect Patrick to be an AI. Didn't expect this to be suddenly an exploration into abusive relationships, which I did not expect, and I applaud them for, because that is not alluded to at all in the trailer. The trailer really does lead it to just be robot amok, and it ended up being so much more. And when they had Patrick revealed as a robot, I'm like, okay, now you have me really interested. I was interested before because I love Sophie Thatcher. I loved her in Heretic, and I really loved her performance in this. I thought you really have to have her sell this in order for it to work. And she does. She does it so well that it's believable, that you forget she's an actress at points. You start to think that she's this suddenly self-aware AI that's just trying to figure herself out and try to get away from these actual humans who are just awful people. Especially the guy who she's supposed to love, which, that's what I love about Jack Quaid. Jack Quaid definitely has refined the what has come before him of actors who kind of look like the good guy, innocent guy, but they can do the dark so well. It's what I like about him in The Boys. And in here, he just does that so perfectly to where you see him, you're like, and even the way he's talking, like, oh, he's kind of the nice guy. He's treating her a little bit, but okay. And then all of a sudden he just goes, yeah, where they take his character as well. So there were a lot of surprises. So I was happy that it wasn't just the one trick pony of her being AI and becoming self-aware. There was so much more that ended up being explored in this film that I dug, and it still kept it interesting, and the film kept moving too,
Yeah, it really never stops.
Yeah.
Let's pull over for a comment. Well, it's a bunch of applause emojis from the blonde in front. Katie, where are you?
Hey, Katie.
I thought for sure she'd be here tonight.
Yes. She also says, I never watched the trailer, but the giveaway was Josh made her carry the big luggage up to the cabin while he carried a little bag. Sophie Thatcher is phenomenal. The performances are all excellent. Thank you for bringing that up, because this is one of those rare movies where, yeah, I think there's not a dull bit of casting in this. Even the cop,
Yeah.
the state trooper, pulls over by the side of the road. He's great in the few minutes he has on screen, and what they do with that character and that cop identity is all great. We'll talk about that in a bit, but I do want to pull over and talk about Jack Quaid. I have not seen The Boys. I think I've seen maybe a couple of scenes out of context, and I don't even think he was in them. But I did see Novocaine, and he plays an actual nice guy who has to step up and sort of become a superhero to save his girlfriend. And in this movie, he is the opposite of that, although there are elements of that character in him. Because during the flashback scenes where Iris is remembering where she met Josh, he's got that kind of like boyish, genuinely happy to be falling in love look on his face. And I was expecting there to be another flashback kind of superimposed where the look he was really giving was more like lascivious and kind of like, yeah, you're my sex bot. But no, from every time they go back to that, there is a look of innocence on his face. And even though he becomes a monster who becomes embroiled in this plot to steal a whole bunch of money from the Russian guy who turns out, again, another spoiler, isn't even a mobster.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, I just said he was a Russian who was really rich, and you just assumed he was. That was great.
Well, because he deals in dirt, and I loved it because I watched it again before the show. I watched it again, and his part, and knowing what and this is what I think will help make this film last, because even if you know all the beats, you look at it, you go, oh man, there it is right there. He talks about how he gets his hands dirty and it's not a clean business that he runs. And you find out he does like landscaping. He works with dirt, actual dirt.
I'm going to be on the lookout for the next time, because I didn't even put that together. But yeah, this is in the category of The Usual Suspects, something that's going to have at least once, one bit of rewatchability for the story and keep going back to it. But no, what I liked about the Josh character is even at the bitter end when he is on top of Iris, like trying to strangle her, he's very sad. He's not one-dimensional. You can see this is a guy who has been rejected. He hasn't been loved. He's been in a lot of bad relationships, and it just, turned him at some point. But you do see him as a human being and not this sort of one-dimensional caricature. The one bit I'll say that kind of disappointed me was they did the rule of three with the electronic wine corkscrew.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
The moment that's introduced, I'm like, that's going to get used on somebody's head. And then they come back to it again in the middle of the movie, and then again with him and So one knock against this movie, but it's a very small one.
But it's interesting because a lot of the things that they do, and the way you've just been describing the Josh character, he isn't this terrible, awful human being that becomes the bad guy in it. He becomes the bad guy, and in many respects, he gets worse and worse. And yet there's a sort of sadness to it. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times have you seen these movies where, you know, the things derail or it gets worse and they don't act like anything has happened to them. The villain is still, you know, thinking they've got this all in the bag and, oh no, Mr. So-and-so or Mr. Wick or whatever the hell's, like, your arm is broken. You know, at the very least, you're going to walk out of here and have 10 months of physical therapy. You know, don't act like nothing's affected you or you can, you know, walk away unscathed, where all the stuff that he's reacting to and getting more and more angry about as it goes on is bad stuff. Other characters die, and now he's got to explain this. You know, they were trying to do the stealing, and that turned into a mess. And I just love the fact that by the end, he's so frustrated because it's just completely unraveled, almost like a domino effect. I also have to say one thing that I loved about this movie that Katie alluded to, but you're right. When she was carrying the bag, and I thought, that's pretty rude. But then again, I've seen men who, you know, are carrying the umbrella over themselves and they don't hold it over the missus when they're going through a rainstorm. Right. So I thought, well, maybe he's a little self-absorbed, or maybe this is a way of saying he's worried about how they're going to take to her this time, and he's not even thinking to be a gentleman. I don't know. But I love that that is there, as Katie points out, and you go back and watch it again and you see that. But the other thing I wanted to say about Sophie Thatcher is she's funny without trying to be funny in this. And one of the things I loved about that is she plays it like she's always sort of like on her heels, back on her heels. Like even when she's like, oh, so you dialed down my intelligence. Well, let's see what happens when I dial it up. And then you think, okay, now she's going to be like that Scarlett Johansson character in that movie that Luke Besson did, where was it Lucy or whatever?
Lucy,
where she's,
where
Lucy. She's able to, how is she making people levitate?
Yeah.
What part of the brain levitates? I want to know what that part is. But, you know, I think, oh, she's going to be really smart. And she immediately has a run-in with the cop that isn't so smart. And she's not really, okay, I'm dialed up my smarts here, but it still isn't letting me get out from under this. I also have to say, after this tragedy where she realizes that, oh no, you're going to end my life, you're going to basically kill me here and all that, and then she finds a way out. But there's that scene where I think the gay couple is talking on the outside. I forget who's talking, but she sneaks out of the living room and she opens that door, and the door's a little heavy because she's probably 105 pounds, right? And she's like, and then she kind of prances out, and she's not trying to be funny there. It's not like a Jim Carrey kind of, you know, Dumb and Dumber kind of move, but it's still funny because this is this young, lithe kind of sex robot. And, you know, oh, I have to negotiate this heavy door and try to escape from my life is funny, but she plays it straight and it's still funny.
Well, that's
and there's a lot of that in this, that kind of stuff where it's played straight and yet you're still finding yourself hitting your knee. Is like, that's funny, even though nobody acts like it is, because for them it isn't.
Right. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say is one of the best parts of this that adds humor without being knock right in front of it. Hey, look, we're doing a joke, is the fact that they work in this element to where she can't lie to humans, regardless of, you know, her being jailbroken and, you know, increasing her intelligence or whatnot. She still has, like RoboCop, her prime directives, which it brought back to be prime directives. You know, and one of them is she could not lie to an actual human. So you get these wonderful moments, like when she encounters the cop, where she ends up changing her language to German, hoping he doesn't understand, because she knows she can't lie to him,
so at least
but
she
she doesn't want
tell
him
the
to
truth
know.
in a language he doesn't understand.
So she's sitting there telling him the truth in German, and he's just like, okay, you know, and she's like, yes, this is working, you know. And it's moments like that in here to where you know, they turn those expectations kind of on a dime for you. And Jack Quaid's character, you know, I think it's one of those, for as weird and as what some people may have opinions about him getting the companion doll for various reasons, I think initially it was genuine. He was just looking for companionship. It was just showing, though, that he got a bit full of himself because he was starting to either forget that she was a robot, or he was enjoying the control for once, because you get the idea this guy's never, you know, he's always been the lower person on the totem pole, so to speak. And it's kind of made him a little drunk or overconfident with power, though underneath he's still that guy who's just looking to be cared for. And so you do get kind of that little bit back and forth in his face, even though by the end he's more of a horrible person than a sympathetic one. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, but there is that bit where I don't think he intentionally did it, but it showed that how his relationship of him having the power dynamic switching, so where he has actually the power for once, power corrupted him in ways,
Well, and that's the thing is, if you go back and look at the plot, right?
Mhm.
It starts off as, it's a devious plot against Sergei, who's our Russian, played by Rupert Friend. But Josh is under the assumption, because Kat, played by Megan Suri, is Sergei's kind of side piece, and she kind of clued the entire friend group into like, hey, I'm dating this this billionaire guy who's a monster, and then there's this idea, well, if this guy really is a mobster and he's like trafficking people and dealing in drugs, if I were to use my companion robot, which the reason you brought up the jailbreak thing, Mark, is because they hacked into Iris's programming and were able to mess around with her settings a bit, thus making her capable of harming someone.
Right.
But the whole idea is, well, if we use her to knock off this guy and blame the faulty robot on it, then we can just take all this money and split it up between us, and everyone gets away scot-free. Iris gets taken back to the factory and probably, taken apart for, parts or whatever, and no one is the wiser. But when the plot starts to break down and Josh realizes, oh, we just knocked off a guy who's innocent, that happens, very late in the movie. But as Jeff mentioned, like, all this stuff starts to crumble around him and drive him a little bit more insane, and come to grips with the fact that, yeah, he might have had an altruistic reason for wanting to, or a way of getting ahead in the world, but it was still involved like a lot of crime and a lot of deception, deceiving Patrick, deceiving Eli, who are kind of roped in as alibis as well. So yeah, this movie really, it's about things. It's about consequences and complex human emotions. And maybe that's why no one went to see it. But this is the kind of movie that I've been starving for years. Smart, mainstream, go have your mind expanded and your heart, pumping in a theater with characters you care about, themes that are extremely relevant, and a script that has so many layers it almost demands to be seen, more than once, possibly 3 times.
And what I love about it is that it's sci-fi set in the future, but not too in the future, but they don't get too heavy in showing, hey, look, we're in the future. But if you pay attention to certain things, you could tell it's a little bit more advanced, not just having the robot, obviously, but other elements or things that come up, even though they're in this remote house. You're like, okay, this is a little bit in the future, but they don't use that as like a focus. That is, they don't dwell on or try to set up this entire world.
Right. They're still stuck in the woods. They're not, there's no like
in the woods, right,
futuristic skyscraper standoff or anything like that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, please go ahead, Mark.
I was gonna say one of the things that I wish here's what would have just brought this film to even better level and more of a surprise. And I had this discussion with Katie on our Patreon about it, is in the opening scene, we get Iris giving a bit of a voiceover, her introduction, talking about love and that. It's a great, she delivers it really well. We get to see them meet and that. I just wish at the very end of her dialogue, her opening dialogue, they would have left out the part where she said, was it something that,
the second day was the day I killed him.
Right. Leave off the kill you part until the third act, then bring back that dialogue, that little bit of dialogue where first day she fell in love with him, and then I killed him. At the very end, put the "and you kill him" part is kind of that note, but leave that out in the very beginning, just to keep it a little, especially the way things play out at the dinner, keep it a little bit like,
I'm not sure why.
I'm sorry. I'm going to say I disagree, Mark, because, and maybe this is just me, but as the movie goes on, I'm so invested in what's going on with these characters and the story and all the twists and turns that I forgot about that line.
Oh, sure.
Until it came back around the end. I'm like, oh, that's right.
Right.
And I think it's kind of like the beginning of American Beauty, when Kevin Spacey is narrating. Is like, my
Sure.
name's Lester Burnham. I'm 40 years old. In less than a year, I'll be dead. And this is like the events setting up everything. Like, oh shit, that's right. This whole thing is him leading up
I
to his
gotcha.
doom.
No, I follow.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's interesting because I had forgotten that too, by and large, until the end, at least, or halfway through. I started to, if that was still playing in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, they've pulled the rug out from so many expectations of this. They put that in there because they're going to make that different too. Like, I'm not going to see how
like
they do that. So
like
it's
a
almost
false
like,
memory
oh,
or
shoot.
something.
Yeah. Well, or you're giving me something here, but then there's going to be such a better way of doing that you'll still keep me guessing and on the ropes because you're too clever by half, and that you could afford to give that to me early on. On the other hand, though, I don't know why they do that, except maybe it's a nod to a little bit of giving, you say like, oh, I know this is coming, so now I got to watch and stuff like that. They did the same thing. Do you remember in 500 Days of Summer when they introduced that and they say, this is not a love story? And it is, but it kind of isn't, because they're not going to have the happy love story ending that you may have expected. You wonder, what do they mean by that? So I was sort of following along with those lines, not necessarily taking it as literal per se, but yeah, it could have been maybe, it would have been interesting to see if they wouldn't have used that exact language on it. The one thing I will say, though, that I loved about this, and this is a credit to writer-director Drew Hancock, who did the film. There's two things, and we talk a lot about horror movies on both of your shows, and I love talking about them. And Katie may chime in on this too if she's still watching. But people who go into the horror genre today, I think, do it mostly because it's the easiest entree into the film world. If you can come up with a good idea that doesn't cost a lot and it's under $10 million, a lot of studios will say, well, do it, because even bad horror tends to make money the opening weekend and probably makes back three times whatever you spent on it. But that means you also get a lot of people who say, well, I'm going to get in this and then I'll do the movies I really want. This guy knows movies. He knows horror. He knows thrillers. He knows sci-fi. You can tell just by the nods to other movies, like some of the ones that we've mentioned here, the way he introduces her carrying the bag. And, oh, is that because the guy is kind of distracted and worried about her too? Or is he kind of sexist? Or is he, she's, his slave, if you will. But the other thing that I liked that Drew Hancock does here too is he never talks down to the genre. And a lot of times when you see young filmmakers do this, I'm going to throw in this joke to let them know that I know this movie reference. And it just takes you out of the movie. And it's like, show me you're intelligent with the screenwriting. Don't show me your intelligence by doing these fanboy nods that just are there and they stick out so often. And even Marvel does too much of that these days. He does little nods that maybe you get them, maybe you don't. But what he does do is he raises those stakes. He makes it intense. Like, I don't get too far ahead of the thing here, but when Josh does that terrible thing to Iris's arm and she has to sit there, and you cut to her and your heart is crying with her. It's so terrible. And yet he doesn't give you any relief or like, okay, she's playing above this because she's going to get out of this. Like, no, at that moment, that's what she's feeling. That's what we're feeling. And there's a purity of that. And he never divorces himself from the action or the characters or the story that he's invested in. And it's rare that you see that. I mean, even sometimes like Quentin Tarantino, when he brings in Samuel L. Jackson to now the story about El Coyote restaurant, and okay, here's his go-to guy that he puts in every goddamn movie. And it's like, do we need him to narrate this? There's not 3,000 other people who could narrate it. There's none of that here. I mean, the little allusions maybe, but nothing that's like, I'm going to show off. What Hancock is showing off is how clever a writer is and a good filmmaker.
I think he's showing off how, yes, clever is a good word, but I don't usually like to think about clever movie writers because it's more like what you're saying. I'm going to put in this reference. It's
right.
Only 5 million people are going to get it. He's very smart. What I loved, and this was just, Iris is a very kind of unusual name, especially for someone to name a robot. I'm like, where did that name come from? The flashback where Josh describes like how he and Iris, I keep wanting to call her Sophie because I keep thinking of Iris as Sophie Thatcher. he describes how he first met Iris for real, which was the company that built her delivered her to the house and set her up, and it took several hours to like program her and put her together. And the whole time he's sitting there talking to one of the techs about how it all works. A great exposition dump without just being an exposition dump.
Right.
Because it's funny and also kind of terrifying the way that the casualness with which you're unpacking your new human. But when they come up to his apartment, you can hear music coming through the walls, and it's the Goo Goo Dolls. It's one of their biggest, most famous songs. And you know what the name of the song is? What is it?
Iris?
Iris. The name of the song is Iris.
Yes.
I'm like, you clever little bastard.
Yeah.
That, and also you talk about the kind of the full range of emotions that play within a single scene. There's a bit in the woods where Iris is on the loose and they're trying to find her, and Patrick inadvertently realizes that he is also a companion, and Eli is kind of talking to him saying, look, yeah, you're my companion, but I really do have feelings for you. And he's kind of down on his knees, and Patrick is above him, and you can see the emotions going through Patrick's mind. And I can't remember, I think I wrote it down, but I don't have it right now, but it's essentially I had it written down, but he's saying like he's confused, he's got this like fire, this heat that's inside of him, and he's like really angry or something like that. I'm butchering the sentiment, but you can tell these roiling kind of conflicted robot emotions or rogue programming, whatever. And you see by the angle, you're just expecting Patrick to snap Eli's head.
Yeah.
Because he's down,
Right.
down there. But then Eli says, look, I'm in love with a robot. And it goes from this moment of tension, like what's going to happen, to, oh my God, they are genuinely, the robot loves its master and the master loves the robot, like genuinely. They have a relationship. And then 2 minutes later, Eli is killed during a struggle with Iris. Gun goes off, that whole thing. And then Patrick is, from there on out, pretty much used as a weapon, because his lethality settings are ramped up to 100, and he becomes a Terminator. But even then, he's not a menacing, mindless cyborg. He's someone who is enraged that the love of his life has been taken away, and he wants to do everything he can to avenge that. Man,
well, and then that scene though plays, and this is the creativeness and why I appreciate the screenplay so much, because it plays into it later and how you feel. If they couldn't make you not like Josh anymore, when Josh runs across Patrick, who has pretty much shut himself down with the death of Eli, he's just sitting there. Iris is trying to make Patrick realize who he actually is. Suddenly, Josh comes along, resets him, imprints himself with the exact same memory, only instead of now Eli in place, it's Josh in place. So he made Patrick fall in love with him. And just doing that violation of that wonderful moment, we see how that meant to Eli, just elevates Josh on the bad guy level in this film for something as simple as that. And also what they do in this is what some films fail to do with this is, okay, she's the robot, like we said, elevate her intelligence, she's strong, that this and that, okay, she's going to be able to win in every situation. She gets reset almost a half a dozen times in this film to where she's vulnerable. She's shut down and restarted back up, but she's able to fight through that, but it takes her a little while. So you're like, she's vulnerable at these spots because he's able to reset her, and I'm going to give them mad props. It is something that I haven't seen, I will say, in nearly all the sci-fi I've watched. Their design idea for the robot was great, because we get him shooting her in the head at one point in the third act. And he thinks, because, sci-fi memory, that's where the hard drive is, because in every other sci-fi robot film, that's where the CPU is in Terminator. That's where the brain and the memory and the hard drive is. And then they have the tech there go, oh yeah, no, that they just took out the Wi-Fi signal. Her hard drive's in the center of her chest. And me being an IT guy during my day job, I gave them mad props because I'm like, where's the motherboard and hardware? Where is the biggest area where you could fit the most equipment efficiently? The chest body cavity, not in the head.
Here's the thing, and it's a bit of a correction, Mark, and I think it speaks to the intelligence of the writing. It's not in her chest; it's down in the womb.
Well, down in the womb, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Which says a lot about the what's going on with her as a female robot, aka I was going to say aka a woman. No, that's terrible. That's not what I meant to say. But just talking about womanhood, and she's not just this sex toy. There are consequences to sex and reproduction, all that stuff. Really kind of making you think. But this screenplay is working on so many different levels all throughout the film, while also just being a fun and kind of crazy genre ride. You can not think about any of it. It's not 2001: A Space Odyssey on the surface. But you can definitely dig deep and get a lot out of it. I'm glad you brought up the memory switching, because they have Patrick's memory of meeting Eli is also another kind of a meet cute scenario where they're at a Halloween party and Patrick's a Dracula and Eli's a dinosaur stepping on the tail and that whole thing. They switched that out with Jack Quaid and they recreate the entire scene down to that goofy dance that they both do. And when you're watching it, it's kind of, I think, meant to be comedic, like, oh, there's Jack Quaid doing this crazy dance that Eli was doing, but it's also kind of demented and sad because that's not the truth. And Patrick's memory and his heart, whatever you want to call it, does that mean his brain is down in his junk? I don't know. Well, maybe
I think that's symbolism. There's a number of there's some symbolism going on both sides there, I think.
Maybe.
By the way, one of the things I thought about with both of you guys when I rewatched this to talk about tonight as well, and what a pleasure that was. It was like, gosh, I want to watch it a third time. I might do that this weekend. But the other thing that I loved about this, and it actually ties into two themes that we've talked about here many times. One is sort of the respect for the tropes of horror that are oftentimes, you can't avoid them. They are part of the storytelling, as Blake Snyder says in Save the Cat. It's always a monster in the house kind of thing. Somebody has to invite the monster in. Maybe the person is the real blame for it. But also, we've talked about it, you and me, Ian, a number of times on the show as well as outside of the show, and that is about the reputation of AI. And one of the things that I think you've said very smartly, and I agree with it, is that we keep thinking of AI as this villain. And I don't think AI is a villain. I think the people using AI are potentially using it villainously. And what I mean by that is there are so many things that enhanced kind of computer stuff. And Mark, this is your world better than anybody here knows it. But there is so much stuff that we can use computers for. We can use these systems for all this for good. And the one we worry about is, well, they're going to replace writers. As opposed to maybe we use them as proofreaders because we can't afford proofreaders anymore. Or, gosh, we're going to use it to look at how we can be more energy efficient. No, some scoundrel out there is going to use it to shut down the grid. And it's not the AI that's the problem. It's the guy who wants to shut down the grid. It's always the man who's the bad person in the machine versus man stuff. Now, you could say Westworld, well, they were making it too good for the rich people's playground that they went too far with it and they weren't doing the checks and balances. The movie that this reminded me the most of, and it's a little bit of an interesting spin knowing that it was 10 years ago, I think, but of course, Ex Machina is also about an AI companion. And as you watch the movie, the genius twist that Alex Garland did, I think, that makes, again, sort of homage to the tropes and respecting them of horror, but also finding a new way for the viewer to go, oh, that's the different spin on it, is that she's not as dumb as we think, but the actual test isn't the Oscar Isaac character's test to see if she can pass as a human. She's testing both of them to see how they will act.
Mhm.
And therefore she wins because she knows how this guy will act and she knows how that guy will act. So all she has to do is whisper in the ear of the woman that he's treated as basically his dance floor diva partner, his sex toy, and his waitress who he's getting mad at, when she spills the food. And she'll do the dirty work for her, because she's worked up. Again, Oscar Isaac's the bad guy. And dare I say, Domhnall Gleeson is bad guy kind of number 2, because he's got his sort of these illusions of grandeur of saving her. And basically she's just being smart, like, you're treating me wrong too, and maybe nicer, but still not really looking at me as far as most of the full thing you could. Here, the same thing. You think, it's going to be this robot run amok story, as you said, Mark. But ultimately, what happens is you get 2 stories about, well, how do the robots feel? How do they feel having to do all this? And then you're playing flibberty gibber with their programming and, shutting her down and making her do this and making him do that. And then you're burning her because, you have to sit there and take it, because I can lord that over you. Man is always the greatest, the most dangerous animal. And we can bitch and moan about robots and AI in the future, but somebody had to create it and somebody had to use it wrong for it to become a threat. And that, I think, is a metaphor about AI today, just as I think Ex Machina was about, the computer, generation when we're pretty soon going to actually have robots. But, how do we treat them? How do we program them? That's on us.
I mean, and that's the thing is when people are arguing with the AI, I personally, when I look at the arguments, it's that I don't think it's necessarily the fact that the technology itself is being hated or whatever, but it's what you said, Jeff, is in how it's going to be used due to past human history. I mean, there's that biggest metaphor is look at what the internet. Global community could come together and solve the world's problems, but what are we doing? Sharing cat memes and 30-second TikTok videos,
and getting the news feed that agrees with our
rather than
stance on the world or whatever.
Finding your bubble and staying in it rather than actually coming at it from all, you've got this big world now, but it's actually not being used like it could be to actually do things. And that's the concern with AI. And that's what every AI movie is. And that's what this one does so well is it explores that. And it's really these stories, even Terminator 2 are not necessarily a reflection of the technology itself, but how it was used, how it was developed. Even in Terminator 2, the reason Skynet nuked the world is because it evaluated the human race and go, all you people are horrible. I'm just going to eliminate you, but the
problem is man.
But it followed its programming but who programmed Skynet initially? Man, AI and robots are a reflection of us, but our true core inner human nature that isn't necessarily restricted like people try to do to the best of their ability.
Right.
Well, and I think that's the genius of Terminator 2, because Terminator 1 is man created this horrible supercomputer which controlled all of its weapons and it blew us up. I think the great part about Terminator 2 is the balance of one of those people in the bombed out future found a way to hack one of those Terminators to reprogram it for good and send it back in time and save the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we get hung up on a lot of these kind of dystopian future things like man's so terrible, man is horrible, we all deserve to die. Man is also capable of great acts of love and innovation.
That's right.
And saving the world in many different ways. And this movie is leans kind of into that that dystopian kind of sensibility, but it also really does take a moment out to show real human tenderness, particularly in the form of Patrick and Eli. There is the girlfriend of Kat, Megan Surrey's character. She has a really tragic end that reminded me a lot of Oscar Isaac's character's end in Ex Machina.
Yes.
Walking away, and all of a sudden this robot comes up and stabs her in the back, and she did she stab? Oh no, Patrick I think did.
No,
right? Yeah, because she was trying to get away, and
Right.
Josh
Right.
Patrick on her, but just goes up, stabs her in the
Reprogrammed.
back.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and Josh hadn't intended that. He said, don't let her leave the house because she was, just gonna try and abscond. And he's like, stop her, and he did.
He did.
But she kind of like turns around and says "F you," and then she goes and she sits on the couch, and she just quietly dies next to Iris, who has been shut down and sitting kind of next to her, kind of corpse-like. And we don't
And
really
that's
see the
symbolism
moment,
too, isn't it?
right? But we don't see the moment of her death. But later
Yeah.
on, in the scene where Josh is unloading all the money from the safe in Sergei's house, trying to make his getaway, we do see the couch and the giant kind of blood stain that's on it from when Kat bled into it. It's like, that's so it's again, it's not like oh, cool and gruesome. We do get the slasher movie body pit later on in a quick shot, but in that moment, it's a reminder that someone died on that couch, and it was very sad because they didn't have to. It was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication that led to her dying, and that's because she intentionally miscommunicated the situation with Sergei. So again, it's just a spiral of consequences for people who were not supervillains or not quote unquote bad people. They just saw an opportunity to do a bad thing, but it went wrong because it's kind of like, it's karma or whatever. There's so much going on in this film. I love it.
The only thing I would say is with the Josh character, there was far more potential for a bad person that he had all along, because we do get allusion to what his previous relationship was, his attitude a little towards it. And so we get a glimpse that in comparison, and that's why I'm so glad they put the Eli Patrick pairing in here, because when you look at it and think about it more, I don't think Josh's intentions, his motivations for getting the companion were quite as genuine as Eli's. I think Eli, or more pure, I should say. Josh's weren't as pure as Eli's. I really get from Eli that he had really pure and good intentions for getting Patrick. Josh, he kind of did, but I also think there's this underlying bit of his character that had a little bit of hand wringing when, just a little bit of hand wringing. Here's an opportunity for once for me to get, a little bit more of an advantage or power dynamic. Whereas Eli, I fully felt Eli went with pure intentions.
Well, there is that almost cartoonish, and this isn't necessarily a criticism. I kind of rolled my eyes at it, but once Josh bonds with Iris, after he's got her out of the box and kind of like has her up and running and everything, they have their sinking moment. And then what did it do? It smash cuts to out, the closed bedroom door and Josh having a screaming orgasm, because that's the first thing he does with his robot. It's not like, oh, I'm going to take you out to dinner and get to know you. It's like you are a plastic sex doll with, programming. I do want to go back to that scene where at the end, Iris is at the dinner table and she's kind of giving Josh the business. And I can't remember if it's in this scene. I think it is, but she basically says, all the money in the world, you can steal this $100 million, whatever, out of the safe, but it's still not going to change the person that you are. You can't run away from these kinds of problems. And that really does get to him. And so he has her take her hand and put it over this open flame and basically burn it to a crisp. And Jeff, you captured that beautifully in your caricature. I'm going to link to that down below.
Oh, cool.
Not in the live stream, but tomorrow when because I didn't think to do it tonight. But it is when we cut to her crying, and we talked a bit about this before, it does kind of raise some questions, like ethical questions, like, is she alive? Through the events of this movie, does she have a soul? Did she have a soul when she was designed? How does that happen? But she's crying. And even though it's explained earlier, when she says, she finds out she's a robot, and she's like, no, I've cried before. I've wept in front of you. He said, I have you topped off with this synthetic like sugar water every 6 months or whatever when I take you into the shop. But she's emoting. Something is happening there. She recognizes, or she feels the pain she's going through emotionally and physically, I guess. So yeah, I'm not thinking of her like wondering, why is this robot crying? I'm like, oh my gosh, she's she's a person.
Yeah.
This is tragic.
It's variations on the Tin Man. You know,
Yeah.
he had the heart all along. You know, he may just inhabit whatever we think of as a physical beating heart, but he's you know, very emotional and very caring and everything else through it. And yeah, I love that about it. That by that point, you're starting to not only shift your loyalties completely to her, just please, I hope she wins and everything else. No question about it. But yeah, she's starting to become more recognizably human, and especially compared to him, even recognizably human seems more human than he's been, other than a bad human, you know. But that's a great point.
Her and Patrick are more human than the humans around them, whether it's the tech that's just rolling her out to reboot her, to Josh, even Patrick. Even though Patrick does some bad, horrible things, you actually feel for him because you realize he's doing these things because he was controlled and told to, and you feel bad for him because we got to see Patrick before he became the tool of Josh to kill, you know, and do bad things. And yeah, by the end of this film, sure, she's a robot burning her hand, but you feel for her. You're feeling that. You're like, and they sit on it for a lot longer than you might expect. And I was impressed by that. And watching the little featurette on the discs, they talk about using a practical robot hand. The director wanted to use as much practical effects as possible, and he's like, so we created this robot hand, and they green screened her hand, and they actually have the robot hand attached to it, and they got animatronics. So like when she's using it in that, and you know, doing that, having it a mechanical hand, like a practical effect, just added even more to the realism that you buy in. She's a robot, but she's also got all of this going on, and oh my God, get her hand away from the fire. And how many times are you going to reset her? You know, I mean, you feel bad for when he resets her too. You're like, oh crap, because you're putting yourself in that position going, well, what if I was aware and somebody just said, okay, go to sleep, and just turn you off and you have no idea what's happening to you for the that's scary as hell.
Well, it also gets into, you know, you could think about this as like, you know, the idea of the simulation. Like, how do we know that we are not?
Oh yeah,
that we're not meat puppets and bopping around for someone else's amusement. But you know, we talked about Ex Machina. This movie also reminded me of Her, the great Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson movie from 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
What I love about this movie, and Jeff, you mentioned the Stepford Wives, Terminator. Every so often we get someone taking a leap and a bound or another stab at the modern state of technology and how we interact with it, particularly in terms of like making humanoid robots. What does that mean? What does that say about us at a given point in time? And, you know, we had movies like AI, which came out last year, and Megan from, you know, a couple years ago. We're getting Megan 2.0. Those are the cheap kind of horror movie versions of it. But this is a really fun genre to play around in. And every time you get one of the stellar examples like the ones that I mentioned, there's a reason to go watch these movies. You can't pigeonhole them in a genre and say, I know it's going to happen, because they're all distinct. They have distinct voices behind them. And then when people talk about, to your point, Jeff, the concern about, AI is going to take away all the writing jobs in Hollywood. I'm like, well, my stance has always been, if you don't want that to happen, then while AI is not in control, stop churning out movies that might as well have been written by an algorithm. Because you're not making a case for your job. Drew Hancock is making a case for his job. He's showing his work, and it really is something special. And I think that's almost a reason I sort of welcome our AI overlords, is because it's just going to make the cream rise further to the top. And we're going to be in for some real special movies. We're going to have to seek them out, because apparently people don't want to see this kind of stuff in the theater. I don't know if this movie bombed, but it didn't have the cultural impact that after having watched it, I'm like, why is this not on everybody's lips right now?
It made almost 37 million against a budget of 10 million. Now that doesn't necessarily say how much might have been spent on marketing, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of it. I mean, they didn't
do a huge amount of marketing. They did basic amount of marketing, and that is a horror movie budget. $10 million.
One thing they made,
and then it makes 3 times its money back. That's your standard horror, formula of sorts of why studios now become a staple. And while we're in this new horror renaissance, if you will, or resurgence, I should say, not renaissance necessarily, of horror films now, because they're like, oh, hey, these are money makers.
Well, I also think that one of the, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, that is something that kind of perturbs me. I didn't know that it made that. I mean, that's a healthy little, it might have even made, gotten the profitability.
Yeah, it'll make more with
right?
VOD,
home video,
et cetera, all that
Right.
stuff. Yeah.
But it's because we have on the one hand, I like the fact that we've got, genre movies in the cinemas again, with A24 or Blumhouse or whatever, or even the big studios with the kind of boutique horror labels. That's great. But when you have stuff like Megan 2.0, like AI, and you've got a trailer for this movie Companion where it's like, oh, it's about a killer robot girl.
Right.
It kind of like it does a disservice because why go see that? I'm going to see it on cable and I'll probably like fast forward through half it or not pay attention because it looks stupid. I want to see people get cut up and blown up by a sexy robot chick. This is not that movie, but it's sort of in that part of that landscape. And it's almost, no, I'll just say it is unfair.
Yeah.
I think there has to be a more sophisticated approach to how anything from Hollywood, whether it's a movie, a show, a miniseries, whatever, is released and thought about. And maybe this is where AI could actually help them by looking at this and realizing where the mistakes have been made and preventing them from making the same ones over and over again. But for starters, it was released on January 31st, which is right in the thick of the Oscar season. So, there's still all this talk about movies that have just opened in December. There's all the play about all the Golden Globes and SAG, and everybody's talking about what's going to win and BAFTA and then all these shows. And so a good movie, a lot of times, was going to get lost in that anyway. Also, January is traditionally a month that nothing opens except for the art house movies that for some reason they only released in New York and LA in December, and they wait to the later part of January for us in the flyover states to get, because we need those big reviews from the West Coast. But there's just a lot of things they didn't do in marketing this property. And now you could say the shrewdest, most important thing they've done is decided, well, we're only going to do 3 weeks in the theater and then it's available streaming. And if they want to see it on the big screen, they can. And for the next month, and they can still watch it at home and nobody's missing out. But I think this is an example to your very point, Ian. This is a terrific film. It got very positive reviews. It's considered probably a sleeper, how well it's been done. And the three of us here love it. That should have been taken care of a lot better. And I don't know who's the cynical person who said, well, there's no stars and I've seen this before. And it's not like Megan where, there's this big battle at the end and blah, 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 whatever. I like Megan, but you're right. It's more of a silly kind of smart, but smart silly in a way. But I mean, it's again, she has to go crazy at the end, and then you are rooting for her to die. Where up until then, it's like, wait a minute, she's the only person caring about this little kid. Why are we so anxious to kill her? But that's
hold on.
Conventions, right?
I want you to finish that thought in a second, Jeff. But Mark, I know you got to go. So I wanted to. We'll talk for a couple more minutes, Jeff. But Mark, thank you for hanging out and joining us. I know that the clock is our enemy. But,
no, it's okay. It just so happens tonight that I do have to leave shortly. But a couple of things I just want to say is even with Rotten Tomatoes, 94% by the critics, 89% by the viewers on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 7.0 rating out of 10 on IMDb, which is so it's not like this film isn't liked. It's not like this film didn't do well. It's just one of those things where this is going to be one that people are going to be watching for a while, though, far more than Wolfman. People will be watching this sooner than they'll be watching Wolfman again because of many things, including Sophie Thatcher's just wonderful performance. This is one of those gems of why I continue to watch a lot of horror. Someone ever asks, why do you keep watching horror? Because they're all the same. I'm like, sure, same. Boom, Companion. Holy crap. Someone did something different that I wouldn't have watched had I not been watching horror films or genre type movies this whole time. So
exactly. Yeah. I called it elevated, it's kind of a wink and a nod, but it's the kind of thing. It's not a regular horror movie, but it's got horror elements in it that
Right.
people who are fans of the genre will recognize and appreciate.
Mhm.
I
So, yeah.
do have to go, so I do apologize. I just want to throw one more recommendation out. We dropped a number of different AI movies. Simone is overlooked. Did you ever see Simone? I think it's got
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino in
I
it.
don't think I
It's
did.
Simone is kind of like a AI version of Wag the Dog of sorts.
Whoa.
They create this hologram, this fake superstar. I forgot what the motivation was, because the studio or whatever, who has been created, and she has her own personality, and it's a really interesting story. It's not a horror story, but it's a really well done story that surprised me when I watched it. And it's one of the earlier examples of films like that, dealing with
I'll have
this.
to check that out. You describing it, it's like ringing a lot of bells, but I don't think I ever saw it.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, they did
Mark.
another one they didn't have a lot of marketing for. They didn't market it right. So, but yeah, I will see you all later. Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, man.
We'll
Catch
talk
you
to you later.
Love you, Mark.
Bye.
All right. One thing that Mark kind of reminded me of when we were talking about box office and ratings. And Jeff, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Did you want to finish your
No,
point?
I'm just going to say, I think that there a lot of times marketing of movies and shows is very smart and sophisticated and clever. And sometimes, like this one, had a number of things working against it that they should have been more aware of, especially with a really good film like this. And the proof is those numbers that Mark just read for us. If it did that well with critics and that well with audiences, they must have had test scores that might have pointed that, or basic filmmakers or people at the studio who should have seen that, but they blundered the way they released it on a number of levels, I think, because it could have been $100 million hit.
Agreed. But I want to get back to that because I thought about this before and then I forgot to bring it up. So I'll bring it up as we're kind of wrapping up. This is going to be a controversial opinion because of the actress and the various controversies surrounding another recent release, but maybe it's because the first time we see Sophie Thatcher in this movie, Iris is going down the grocery aisle and she picks up a peach and she's like eating it. I think that's when she meets Josh. She looked like Snow White. And
yeah, a little bit with that headband and everything. Yeah.
I was thinking, why was Sophie Thatcher not cast in Snow White? Now, that movie had a lot bigger problems than Rachel Zegler, but you watch this movie, first of all, Sophie Thatcher, she's great, but man, is she pale. I mean, her skin is almost literally white as snow. But also, this is a movie about a complete innocent who is having to navigate this world of people who, for whatever reasons, end up wanting to kill her, and she finds unlikely friendship in the form of Patrick in some respects. It's this, like this movie is, I think people, if they want to see a great version of a twisted kind of Snow White-esque story, to seek out Companion and skip the latest Disney nonsense. I just love that this movie is really about something. And I'm going to be thinking about this and watching it, I think, a lot, which I don't say very much about movies.
That's great. That's great to know. I love it. Yeah, because I felt the same way. I was really just so impressed on so many levels. Not only just the cleverness, I know not a great word, but just the way it kept me unaware of where it was going to go, and yet it seemed right the way it went on so many of those places. And even within a scene, to your point, it's like we kill off Kat, and she's a character that we don't have a ton of investment in because she's sort of a little bit dismissive and not nice, but she's a person too. And when she gets killed, it shouldn't just be, well, she's just dead. No, the whole point is that this is now unraveled in this thing where there's multiple bodies and it's out of control and it's just wrong. And they spend the time, Drew Hancock spends the time to show that, which is great. But I also love the fact that it says what it says about machines and the way they really thought through how she's programmed and all that. And it becomes plot points, which is really interesting. It's not like, oh, her wiring's gone amok and now she's running wild. Nope. There's all kinds of ways that they can still affect that for good, for bad. And it's, I love that.
Well, and something else that gets another sub layer to this thing is we've talked about Josh and how he was kind of just a guy who didn't really have much going on. He was kind of bitter at the way that the world had kind of treated him and what he thought he was kind of entitled to, but he doesn't have much in the way of job prospects. And then you think about all the people. The main setting is at Sergei's palatial secluded woodland estate, but he's the only one in this movie who has money. Like these other folks, like Kat is his kind of like side piece again. She sees it as an opportunity to kind of get his money, but these it's not like Iris is being introduced to this world of wealthy elite people. They want to be that,
right?
But they're all kind of desperate, and that's another thing that when Kat dies, it's not like, oh well, she was rich and selfish and terrible. No, she was just kind of desperate in her own way. There's a lot going on with each of these characters, even the ones that we only get for like 8 minutes of total runtime in the 2 hours, whatever.
That's very good. That's great.
But speaking of runtime, we are way past. But I've enjoyed the hell out of this conversation. I've enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I'm jealous of you, Jeff, that you got to see this without knowing anything, because man, what a ride.
I know, they're very rare, very rare.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to be talking about a very different kind of movie. When I say we, I don't know who's going to join me. We're going to be talking about the Minecraft movie.
No.
Yeah, so
I have not seen that one. I'm not sure that's on my weekend roster, but
oh, come on, Jeff. What better way to celebrate your birthday weekend than with a Minecraft movie?
Yes. Oh, that's funny.
So,
I can think of some other ones if you'd rather talk about something else.
No, I'm going to see the Minecraft movie. What
right.
Well, just what's on your radar? What are you thinking about?
That's a good question. I'd have to think for a second. Give me do we talk about Black Bag?
Not yet, but that'll be
been
on
in the
demand
theaters
pretty
for a
soon.
I was going to say that could be one sort of like this one. But that one's been doing, I think, that one had some marketing behind it, and I think it's showing in the box office, but
okay.
Just a thought.
Yeah, well, there'll be plenty more for us to talk about
For sure.
in the months and years coming up.
Yes.
But Jeff, thank you very much. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.
And thank you for spending it here with me, with us. We definitely appreciate it. And,
it was a great gift.
Well, folks out there, be sure and support Jeff at the Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists. Mark, who had to jet, you can check his stuff out at Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room podcast. And all of Earth's Mightiest Critics info is down below, including Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front, who popped in with some comments earlier. Love you, Katie. And so if you like this live stream, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications and all that stuff. And join us back here next week at some point to talk about the Minecraft movie. But until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much. Take care. And go AI. No, I don't know. I'm not going to cheerlead for AI. But, I don't know. But